Good evening. Welcome back to The Bible Speaks from LBC Television Ministries. One of the things regular viewers will notice is that we seem now to be permanently ensconced in what was our Studio 1, which was the Sunshine Club studio. And I imagine when we start up recording again, which will be shortly for Sunshine Club, we'll probably be fighting for studio space. But for now, I'm going to enjoy it. And also, we have some advancements in our techniques in the sense of camera shots and insert pictures and things. So hopefully tonight's program will be just a tad more interesting, if such a thing could be more interesting, than learning about the Bible. But anyway, before we start tonight, I know it said Shechem on the credits, but I need to go back to last week, and we kind of finished up Jericho in a bit of a hurry, and I need to apologize for that. But as I was working through the script, and I do have some notes down here, it's not a script so much as just a series of notes, that when I came to the end, most of what we can say about modern Jericho is very heavily tainted with politics. In other words, it's, the Palestinian and the Israeli conflict and everything else. And I really don't think that that's something we need to dwell on in this program. Normally, on public access, you don't deal too much with politics in any program. And certainly when we're talking about a religious program, which this is, I don't want to confuse people, we're talking about who's right and who's wrong. As I said when I finished last week, Jericho's been fought over so many times, it's a shame that in our modern age we're still fighting over it, or causing problems. It is, though, I want to tell you, that it is a big tourist attraction. Despite the fact that it's under Palestinian control and travel restrictions and all the rest of it, it's still a very great tourist attraction. So if you're ever going to Holy Land, Jericho is definitely a place you want to see. Okay, and you can read more about Jericho. There's a couple of good books out there with the history of Jericho, and there's one that deals totally with the archaeology, and they're good books. I mean, they really are interesting, not boring stone counting books. Okay, so tonight we're going to start as what is this? The second city, isn't it? Third city, Shechem. Now, most of you can remember the name because it's in your Sunday school lesson, or you read it in the Old Testament, this sort of thing. And you probably will recall that it was the capital of Israel after the split between Judah and Israel. Well, that's something to come on with later. But you have to understand, originally, way back, I'm talking a long way back, Shechem was a Canaanite town. Okay, Canaanites. Remember who the Canaanites were? They were the people who occupied the land before the Israelites got there. If you look at an ancient map, and a little later on I'm going to show you one, but for right now, if you look at an ancient map, you'll see that where the Israelites are is in the mountains, on the sort of spine of Israel, and the Phoenicians are down on the coast, and the Canaanites were the people that the Israelis or the Israelites displaced. It's kind of interesting that when you look at the archaeological evidence where they have dug up small worship places from the early Israelite times and compare them to the Canaanite, the floor plan is almost exactly the same. They took the best ideas from whoever they conquered. Anyway, I'm digressing. But anyway, Shechem's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, okay, the Old Testament for us, if you like, as an Israelite city of the tribe of Manasseh. And one thing we need to be clear when we talk about cities in this context is we're not talking about something with 10,000 people or even more. We're talking about what we would call today no more than a village. Sometimes not even that. But they were referred to as cities. And Shechem was the first capital, not Jerusalem. Shechem was the first capital of the kingdom of Israel. All right? I mean, nowadays, it's traditionally associated with the town of Nablus, which if you have your Bible out, you probably open up and see where that relates to. but it's identified nowadays with archaeology and that sort of thing with the nearby site near to Nablus of Tel Balata. Tel Balata means like hill or mound of it, which is in the town of Balata el Balad, which is in the West Bank, again in Israel. Its position, where it was in the Hebrew Bible, it says it lay north of Bethel and Shiloh. Now, if the guys put up the map that I've got for them, you'll see, it comes up on the screen, it's on the high road from Jerusalem to the northern districts. And say I'm waiting for the map to come up, and then I can talk about it a bit. But there you go, there's the shot there. You'll see where Shechem is in the middle there, and it's on the high road from Jerusalem to the northern districts, a short distance from Michmetah. Now, if you need sort of some backing for the evidence of that, then you can look in Judges, or you can look in Joshua, because it talks about those very roads. Okay, it's also near Dothain, which is mentioned all the way back in Genesis. Okay, chaps, thanks for the map. Okay, now it was in the hill country of Ephraim, again from Joshua and Kings and Chronicles. So we know from the Bible references where it was and what its situation was. And it's immediately below Mount Gerizim. Immediately below Gerizim. Hold that thought for a minute. Again in Judges. Now, I always like it when a biblical statement, like it was there and here, is substantiated by something outside the Bible. In this case, Josephus in his Antiquities talks about the city which lay between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And there's a very old map called the Malaba map, and it's not the one I'm going to show you, but the next picture that comes up, it sits between the two mountains. So if they bring up the next picture, you'll see exactly where it is. If you look at the two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, Shechem, the old town of Shechem, was right in that notch between them. And the more modern town, as you can see, is coming towards you, towards the viewer, as you might say. And that's grown up. It's almost it started almost a kilometre away from where the original town was. Now, I'll mention it later on in the program, but if you stand on one of those mountain tops, they're not real big, and that area is not really big. If you were addressing a whole horde of people who were standing in the middle between those two mountain tops, it forms like an amphitheatre, like the old Roman circuses where you could stand in one corner and speak and it could be heard all over the place. Those of you who've travelled to England or some of those places that have dome churches, St Paul's in London, you can stand on one side of the dome and talk, and somebody on the other side can hear you because the sound is naturally trapped. And so it is with this particular situation. Thanks, chaps. Appreciate it. And these indications, as I say, were substantiated by Josephus. Now, whilst Josephus' politics were a bit suspect, more about him in one of these later programs, his accounts, as far as geography and that sort of thing, were quite good. Okay, and also Shechem's also been called Sycamore. Now, there's another thing that you have with biblical places at different eras. They're called different names. Okay. Now, what Josephus says, and what the Marbella map, which is a very old map of those times, I'm not sure where it's actually contained. I read about it, but I haven't actually seen it. But it places Shechem or Shechem in between Tur Gobel and Tur Gerizim. Again, the names have changed, but it fits. Okay. And the site of Shechem in most sources, in most of the sources that you read about, most of the places that you get with, is located close to the town of Flavia Neapolis. Okay, now we're more about that later. And that's a Roman name, as you can understand, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, let's go back to, I think, the general description, okay? Let's go back to its early history. It dates back to about 4,000 years. So that's old. That's really old, okay? It's mentioned in the 3rd millennium Ebia tablets, okay? and we're going to talk about tablets in a little while, but the tablets where they write down the records on, the different discoveries of these collections of tablets are called by different names, okay, with the Ebla tablets, but it's mentioned in them, and these tablets were found in Tel Mahdik, which is another one of those archaeological sites. In contents of, it was a city where Shechem was the regular deity. What I'm trying to say is that these were not just casual things. This was a record of the inhabitants and all the surrounding areas, and Shechem comes up in that. Okay, very long time ago. Okay, it was a commercial centre. If you looked closely, if you had time to, if you look closely at the map I just showed you and the one that's just coming up now, if you look closely at these maps, you will see it's right in the middle. You can see where it is in the middle of that map, and you see the roads, the road going north, the road going east-west. It was a big commercial centre because of its position, obviously, in the vital trade routes through the region. All right? It's ideally placed. And really, if you see, it's ideally placed to be the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, because from half the picture up, that was where it was. Okay. All right, thanks for the map, chaps. Okay, so it traded in grapes and olives and wheat, livestock, pottery, between the Middle Bronze Age, for those of you who like these sort of dates, and the late Hellenic period, which is 1900 BC to 100 BC. So in other words, or CE, whatever, BCE, if you're using the before Common Era things. But I mean, it's been a long time. As I said, it had been a Canaanite settlement, and it's first mentioned in the, and I'm not sure if I can say this properly, it's first mentioned in the Egyptian texts on the Sebek Ku Stele. Now, stele is one of those, like Cleopatra's needle, or big piece of rock with writing on it, where they recorded things. It's mentioned there. And an Egyptian stele of a noble, would you believe, at the court of Sennacherib III, who was the pharaoh 1880 to about 1840 BC. In the Amarna letters, again, a collection of clay tablets in the Amarna letters of about 1350 BC. And more about those in a minute. Sakmu, i.e. Shechem, okay, was the center of a kingdom carved out by a man called Labaya or Labayu, whichever translation you read, okay, who was a Canaanite warlord who recruited mercenaries from among the Habiru. Now, I know what you're going to say. That sounds familiar. Well, think about it, all right? The Habiru pop up in archaeological discoveries and in literature quite a lot around this period. And we're going to talk more about those in a minute, but I just wanted you to remember that. And Labia was the author, because he signed his name to them, of 3 of these Amarna letters. Now, and you'll see a picture in a minute, but not just yet, of the letter. It's a clay tablet. It's not a papyrus thing or paper or anything like that. But he was the author of 3 of the letters, and his name appears in 11 of the 382 letters they found, tablets found. He's referred to about 28 times. And obviously he was somebody who liked his own personality, because the basic topic of the letters, all of those, is Labaya himself, his relationship with the rebelling countryside Habiru. Now we know that when the Israelites came into the promised land, whilst the Bible makes it sound straightforward, they marched in, conquered, and that was the end of it. If you read your Bible carefully, it wasn't like that at all. It took a long time for them to finally work their way through the land, years and years. It wasn't all over in a week. And there were already people in the lands, resisting them. And this chap, Labayu, is complaining bitterly about these mercenaries and these Hebrew who are giving him a hard time. And one of the things the ancient Israelites were really good at, it appears to be anyway, was fighting. Perhaps because they had to defend themselves in the desert against other marauding bands, or maybe because they just had to survive in the desert. But the the comments in history about them seem to point out they were pretty fierce fighting people, so something to be feared. Okay, so let me digress a little minute here. So what are the Amarna letters? I mean, just so we get, because they come up a lot in these studies of the old cities of the Bible. We refer to them a lot. They're sometimes referred to as the Amarna correspondence or the Amarna tablets. Take your pick. If they show a picture in a minute, you'll see what one of them looks like. Okay? They're an archive. They are the archives. They are the written records of pre-going civilization. And you'll see when the picture comes up that they're written in what we call cruciform. Okay? And they're written on clay tablets. Oh, I see they got a different picture up here. Never mind. But they consist of diplomatic correspondence. And if they go through the program, I'm sure they'll find the right picture. I mean, a clay tablet is a clay tablet. It can't be hard to find. Okay. And they're diplomatic correspondence between the Egyptian administration. Don't forget, that whole area was administered by Egypt. Okay? And its representatives. So in Cana and Amuru, during what the Egyptians called the New Kingdom. Okay? So, the letters were found in Upper Egypt at, where else? Amarna. So that's what they're called, which is the modern name for the Egyptian capital of Akhenaten. Remember Akhenaten? The sun god worshipper, the one god person in the Egyptian pharaoh panoply? So, that city, Akhenaten, was founded by the pharaoh Akhenaten, 1350, 1330, during what they call the 18th dynasty of Egypt. And the reason the Amarna letters are unusual in our studies or archaeological research or Egyptologists, all that sort of thing, the reason they're unusual is because they're mostly written in Akkadian. Now, I'm not trying to confuse you here. Akkadian cuneiform. Okay, that's the old. If you look at the tablet, it looks to have like little lines carved in it. Different shapes, different lines, the runes, if you will. And it was the writing system of ancient Mesopotamia, not that of ancient Egypt, which is a little unusual. Perhaps they let the colonies use whatever they knew rather than insisting in England. I mean, there's 382 tablets. That's a lot. That's a big, that's like 382 files of history for you. And the written correspondence covers a period of only about 30 years. So it's not like 300 years of history. It's just a little short gap of history. And they are really great significance for Bible studies. I don't think you'll find a serious Bible study, or for that matter, a Semitic linguistic chap, studies languages, who doesn't know about the Amarna letters, because they shed so much light on the culture and the language of the Canaanite people in pre-biblical times. Going back a long way, don't forget. I mean, the letters, although they're written in Akkadian, and again we're talking about cuneiform, and I'm not a student of cuneiform. I don't know how to read it, and I don't know how you get expressions in there. Like how you express sarcasm or something like that. I don't know, but they're heavily coloured by the mother tongue of their writers. So I imagine the way the sentences are phrased are. You can say, oh, this was written by a Canaanite, or this was written by a Phoenician, or this was written by somebody. By the way they phrased the sentences. And the writers were an early form of Canaanite, which was, surprisingly enough, the language family which later evolved into its daughter languages, Hebrew and Phoenician. Okay? So these Canaanite people provide absolute valuable insights into the beginnings of the languages that eventually became Hebrew and Phoenician several centuries before they actually became fixed, languages. the one of the Amana letters I want to talk about, and as I said, cuneiform tablet, primarily written in Akkadian, although I think possibly if there's an answer on any of them, it probably was written in Egyptian. Anyway, they're first discovered about 1887 by local Egyptians, as I say, who kind of like a lot of archaeology things. They found them, they dug them up from the ruined city of Amana, and sold them on the black market, basically. And then somebody found them and said, "Oh, good, where'd you get these?" And they told them, okay. They'd originally been stored in an ancient building, okay, which they called, archaeologists called, the Bureau of Correspondence of Pharaoh. Okay, whatever. Pharaoh's, correspondence library. And then once the location was found, once they kind of gave up the locations, and the ruins were explored for more. One of the problems in getting to study them is that the initial group of letters recovered by them have been scattered among museums all over the world, in Germany, England, Egypt, France, Russia, United States has some. But the archive contains a wealth of information about cultures and kingdoms and events and individuals. And it's a period from which very few written sources survive. I mean, it's not really to do with Shechem so much, but it sheds a great deal of light on Egyptian relations with Babylon, Assyria, Syria, Canaan, and Cyprus. Cyprus figured a lot. And remember, Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean, so they were far away as there. As well as relationships with some of the tribes, like the Hittites and people like that. And they've been really important in establishing the history and the chronology of the way things happen. I mean, letters from the Babylonian king, Kadashman I, anchor or point to and anchor the time frame of Akhenaten's reign to the mid-14th century. So right away we know when Akhenaten reigned, okay? They also contain the first mention of this Near Eastern group known as the Hebiru. And they have a possible connection with the Hebrews. Now, the reason being the similarity of the words and that sort of thing, but also their geographic location still is up in the air. Now, there are a lot of scholars who will say that the Hebiru is another name for the Israelites, and this was the beginning of the Israelites coming off the desert and taking over in Canaan. Maybe so. Nobody seems to have proved it either way. It's a nice thought, though, that here we have the first mention of the Israelites before they were Israelites, if you know what I mean. Okay? I mean, other rulers in the letter, people of Shechem, the ruler of Jerusalem, and this guy. He's a very quarrelsome king. Judging by the tablets, he was always up in arms about something. This guy is called Rib-Hadad of Byblos. And in over 58 letters, this chap requests military help for the north to repel the Hittite invaders, okay, and to the south to fight against the Hebiru. So obviously a lot going on in that period of time. But those letters, I wanted to give you a bit of brief explanation, because we will be using extracts from them in different programs as we go through this, and you need to know something about them. Back to Shechem. It may be that this is the same place as Sakama, which is mentioned in an account dated to the 19th Egyptian dynasty. Okay? Now, let's get into the Hebrew Bible. Shechem first appears in the Bible in Genesis 12, which records how Abraham reached the great tree of Morah at Shechem and offered sacrifice nearby. So even back in the very beginning, before the Israelites became the Israelites, if you like, there we are with all these places starting to connect together. And as we go through these programs, you will see that all these kind of towns and cities mentioned in the Bible sort of offhand all connect to each other one way or other. Shechem isn't just a town that became the northern kingdom's capital. It had been a prominent town in Israelite history from Abraham's time. Okay? Now, Abraham reached the great tree of Moreh at Shechem, by name, and offered sacrifice nearby. In Genesis, Deuteronomy, the book of Judges, Joshua, they all make Shechem over all the other cities of the land of Israel. Don't forget, we don't have David yet. Jerusalem's not become an important place. Jerusalem was just Jerusalem, a small hilltop village at this time. Okay? So, at Shechem, Abraham built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him and given him that land over his descendants. So by the time Abraham got to Shechem, which is well into the Canaanite district, he built an altar and said, thank God that the land had been given to him, okay, and that to the land of his descendants. Genesis 12, okay. And the Bible states, of course, that on that occasion, God confirmed the covenant he'd made with Abraham back in Haran regarding the possession of the land of Canaan. And in Jewish tradition, the old name was understood in terms of the Hebrew word Shechem, Shekem, which means shoulder or saddle, sort of corresponding to the mountainous configuration of the place, looking like a saddle between the two mountains. And there, I'm afraid, we'll have to give it up because we've run out of time. We'll pick it up again next week. Until then, maybe look at your references in your Bible to Shechem. Get familiar with it. Good night. God bless.